Hello and welcome to MJ's Views, the podcast where nothing is off limits. I'm MJ and I'm going to be your host for today's podcast, where we're going to have meaningful conversations and discuss topics that might make a lot of you uncomfortable. And today I'm joined by Nadia Ahmed from Mind Matters.
Thank you.
A very influential personality when it comes to the mental health industry in Tanzania. And today we are going to discuss something that many of you might have had a discussion about in your homes and in your social circles. We didn't have mental health back in the days. Is this new generation very soft, or have we pampered them too much? Nadia, welcome to MJ's Views, and it's going to get a bit edgy and uncomfortable for many. So just a bit of a warning before we dive into this. You've been in this industry for very long, and for many people, you have kind of created a revolution in this industry. What prompted you to set up Mind Matters, and why do you think that mental health really is applicable and existent in Tanzania?
Thank you, MJ. I'm happy to be on the podcast. So what inspired me to get into mental health? I could say the first reason was very selfish. I grew up in any African household. It's not just nuclear, you and your parents, it's cousins and da in between.
Everyone and everyone.
Yes, and I was a very jealous child. So I think growing up, I was a bit vindictive, very mean sometimes. So it was more curiosity of wanting to understand myself. Why did I behave the way I did? To get to know me. But then also we have history of mental illness in my family. So my late grandmother had bipolar disorder, and just seeing how every month basically she would be going through something. The healthcare system didn't really have enough to support her or the family. Muimbili was not the most ideal, still isn't the prettiest place to be. It's not the most... if I were to struggle with my mental health, I would not want to be admitted. Let's just say it like that. So that inspired me to get into mental health. And it inspired me to get into psychology more so than psychiatry, because with psychology, it's more preventative. So when we speak of mental health, most people just clump everything together, the illnesses, the mental health struggles and challenges, but actually these things are separate, right? We all possess mental health. We can have good mental health or we can have bad mental health, but all of us, regardless of our illness status, have mental health. And for one to get to a mental illness, their mental health needs to be deteriorating over a period of time until the illness is triggered.
Makes sense, yeah.
Right? So my goal was, why don't we just get into a space where we can actually prevent people from experiencing these illnesses, because they are unpleasant, they take away one's quality of life, they disrupt families. Because growing up, I didn't know my late grandmother very much, because she was oftentimes not well, right? And because sometimes the illness can be, she's not fully there, my parents were very protective. So they didn't really let us freely mingle and engage, right? And so growing up, seeing others with their grandparents and how grandparents spoil you, and then not having that, but also seeing how my dad, Shem, grew up with someone who was not fully present to care for him, and how that impacted him. Rightfully, he became very resilient and strong, but you didn't really need to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a good thing, but if I don't have to grow the resilient muscle, I would prefer it. But so that was kind of what got me into here, and also just seeing the landscape. There aren't a lot of psychologists in the country, not even a lot of psychiatrists in the country. When it comes to private mental health care, also when I was coming back into Tanzania, there wasn't a lot of spaces that offered the support. So that was kind of my why. And also I was just good at it. I think growing up with a Rotarian dad, we were constantly just helping here, charity there, giving back there, constantly just in the community. And it came very naturally, caring for others.
Yes.
So I found taking this route easy. I'm not a fan of studying, and school was not my biggest I was never a big fan. But when it came to psychology, it just came so naturally. Like even the reading and the exploring and the diving and the questions and the, discussions were very easy and natural for me. So I was like, okay, we can like help make a living, and still fulfill this purpose that I feel like I have.
Right. But you must have had some really random people looking at you thinking, what on earth is this mind matter setup that you're talking about? Because you spoke about resilience, which we'll talk about a bit later. But it's interesting because our grandparents, if you went and told them that, listen, I think I'm suffering from bipolar disorder or depression, everybody said, just go to the mosque and be sincere to God and stuff like that. So I'm just intrigued to know when you went and presented your project to the first person in Tanzania, did you get this? Have you lost it? Like, what are you even thinking about?
I think I'm very privileged. Like my family is very open-minded. They're very much, we don't understand it, but you understand it, do it.
Right.
But many people were still like, okay, so what is this about? So you're reading our minds, what are you going to do? Even coming back, the reason my matters even started is because no one was hiring, employing, or even understood what psychologists do. So I was just kind of forced into Mind Matters. Like I had to, because I wasn't going to be doing anything else. But it was still very much, even today, people are like, okay, so what do you do? What exactly is this that you do? So you sit and you just listen to us. And we're like, okay, no, but yes and no. We listen intelligently so we can ask you the right questions so that you can arrive at your own answers as to why you're here. So it's very confusing to most people. But I think gradually now, more and more people are understanding. It helps having advocates. Like my dad doesn't understand, like when we started off, he didn't really fully grasp what it was all about, but he was just very supportive. So speaking to his friends and trying to like put pieces together and say, okay, Nadia can help you with this because she understands human behavior like that, has been helpful. So I'm seeing even the older generation, the more you kind of discuss and normalize it, but also use everyday examples to kind of explain these concepts, it becomes easier.
Right.
Like they get it a bit more.
Well, that's a bold step that you took, because I remember when I moved back from England in 2016, and I was speaking to someone. I said, maybe Tanzania needs a bit of education about mental health, which I never understood what mental health was, to be honest. It was just more of a PR kind of thing, where you grow up and when you sit in discussions, you're like, mental health is a bit of an issue. So it was the topic that everyone was discussing in the social gathering. So when I moved back and I looked at it, I said, okay, maybe we need helplines and we need this and that. And I also spoke to a few people. But I always got the same questions that you got. But obviously you took that step and I didn't, which was you believed in something and you went with it. However, what do you think caused this huge shift in the Tanzanian mindset of, okay, this is not black magic, or this is not, a spiritual issue within ourselves. It's actually a mental health problem.
I think those beliefs are still there, but for the larger community, I think social media and access to information has helped.
Okay.
I think it's helped significantly because now people, before, I think most people just tie it to spiritual possession or witchcraft or, you've probably committed a sin and this is punishment from God. Towards more of an understanding, because now they have actual information to use. Sometimes when we don't know something, whatever is within our reach, we can use that to explain. And with our African context, religion is one thing that helps. It doesn't give you all the answers, but it at least gives you a direction. And when it comes to witchcraft and things like that, these are prominent in our context. They are very widespread. So that's kind of helped. And then what also helps people to kind of explore the other avenue into the more, I think, Western concept of, mental health and mental illnesses is more so the fact that not always does the spiritual route or the witch doctor route or the herbal medicine route is helpful for these things. And so you find that, okay, they try here, they try the mosques and the churches, and they try the, natural traditional healers, and they try the herbal medicines, and they try the witch doctors. And then nothing is working, and then they just end up at the hospital, and then something helps.
Yeah.
And also the fact that psychiatry, I think, also helps people to kind of, okay, it medicalizes mental health, but it at least gives an understanding. Because when one pops a pill and then suddenly their mood is improving, then we're like, oh, so it's not, they've not been bewitched, they're sick, right? It takes a bit longer to get people to fully grasp the concept of psychotherapy, because there's no medication. The pill is just you going inward, coming out, changing your behavior, changing the things that you're doing, how you're thinking. It's a lot more work. So it's taking people a bit longer to grasp it and accept it, compared to the psychiatric support where it's medications. Like, I have a headache, I take a Panadol, the headache's gone. It's the same. I am suffering from depression, severe anxiety. I take a pill, and all of a sudden I'm feeling a bit better.
Yeah.
Right? Medication has that power. Like, within 2 weeks, you are probably all good. Right? The first pill you pop in, you start feeling those changes. Whereas with therapy, you can, like, at least 6 sessions to start noticing some form of change. So it's a commitment, right? And it takes a bit longer. But what I've noticed since starting, what's helped is people's testimonies. So, okay, like, even my matters only grew because I worked with someone and they were, feeling much better. They trusted the process. And then now they're saying, oh, I did this and it worked. So that also helps to infiltrate people's minds to see, oh, there's this also, this concept. And also the fact that medication has a lot of side effects. Most people try to, like, how can we get better without having to suffer? So that's
a bit of both.
Yes.
No, because, I look at it as a very, I got into trouble with my wife when we were discussing this, but I say that this new generation are very soft. I think they've been pampered too much. They live in this nice, bubbly world of theirs, wrapped in cotton wool.
Yeah.
And every time you whatever you want to do with this new generation, you have to think twice or thrice.
Yeah.
And if you compare it to our generation or the generation before us, where you might not have the most expensive football shoes, but you were still out there playing with your friends.
Yeah.
You would get hurt, you would stand up, dust yourself off, and you still move on. Which takes me back to the word resilience that you used. Our grandparents would never understand what bipolar disorder was, or they would never understand what depression was, or what feeling left out means, or identity crisis and all of that. But don't you think that, to some extent, is useful? Because resilience is a very important tool to get you to where you want to, right? And I think now, if you will flip it and you look at the business world, everyone's talking about mentors. You need a mentor, you need someone, you need a coach. And you're looking at our parents and you're thinking, no one ever coached my parents. There was no one who sat and put an arm around my father and said, listen, it's okay, this is business, you're going to get through it. We are a family of 6 children, so we are 6 siblings. And I sometimes look at my mom and I'm thinking, no one in this generation would even think of popping 3 kids out, because 2 in itself is such a challenge with all these dynamics. But I don't know if you share the same sentiment, or you have experienced these with your clients in here, that the new generation might just about could do with a bit of resilience and a bit of, hey, you know what, just grab yourself up and get going.
So, yes and no, but yes. So basically, I think, as you said rightfully, like, resilience is extremely important. And the only way we get to actually build resilience is when we face these difficult moments. Because no one built, you need, let's say when you go to the gym, as you're lifting to get bigger muscles, there must be tearing of muscles that happens in order for bigger, stronger ones to grow. So if we avoid the tearing, there will be no bigger muscles. There will be no growth. So when we shield and shelter our children from any form of disturbance, any form of psychological or emotional pain, we're really not doing them any favors. I'm saying our children because it starts at home. And usually it is the parents that kind of shield the children. And then they go out in the world and no one gives a toss about your feelings. No one cares. And so you're left there without the tools to actually navigate. You're not resilient enough. So in a way, it creates softer kids who perhaps as they're growing older will face more challenges. And that's why a lot are needing therapy, right? But it's having that balance is important. I think most parents are coming from spaces of very hard, tough love type parenting. You must go through these things. You must navigate through the mud and the darkness and the challenges. Natural selection, the brave ones succeed. The ones who don't, they don't. Whereas now we've moved to the opposite end, the other extreme that no, our children should not suffer, should not experience this pain. We need to kind of look at all the lessons we've learned and think 10 steps ahead so they don't get there. But what we're doing is we're taking away the joy that they get through the learning process, through going through that pain, which also isn't good. So I think that's where we are right now as parents, is that we've gone through so much and we're like, no, my child will never. If I walk to school, my child will have the AC car and the driver and no one's going to be late. But perhaps life is not like that. Sometimes things are late. I might be at the airport and my Uber hasn't arrived. What do? I'm not going to sit here and have a meltdown. I need to think about and strategize. Maybe that car will never even show up, right? So if I'm a child, let's say 13-year-old, at school and my driver is constantly always there, I don't need even to fuss. I'm not really learning how to problem solve in such situations. And that's a safe environment. As an adult in, let's say, I don't know, a foreign country and different language, and now I've already done the planning. So a good thing is they learn how to plan ahead. But then in that moment, what do I do? How do I navigate? I've never had that experience. And this is a very simplistic example. But that's what we're stealing from the kids today. And that's why they are becoming a bit, or they could feel a bit softer. And the slightest inconvenience becomes something that is
a big issue.
Right? Only because we're kind of shielding them from so many opportunities for them to learn on how to navigate through these challenges. So finding that balance, I think we've moved extreme to extreme. I don't think it was ideal when parents their generations and ours I used to sit at school until it's dark. My parents forgot, not even probably, I know they forgot about me and left me there. So that's a bit traumatizing. But finding that balance, that it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be that the child wants a Nintendo and we immediately get it for them. No, because that's not helpful. Or the child is going through a specific challenge at school and we go and tell off the teacher. They're not going to learn how to problem solve. They need to be able to stand up to the teacher and communicate and express why they feel that they're being perhaps treated unfairly. But if we as parents just step up and do it for them, they're never learning. And they will get into these workplaces at some point, and this happens, and then they need a Nadia to help them navigate. Which, again, it's just, I think it trivializes mental health care. Because now, even the slightest issue someone is unable to deal with and needs a professional. I mean, it shouldn't be like that. Sadly, right now, what we're seeing that's actually the case.
The trend now,
and the trend in most settings. But hopefully we find a nice, because I know when you go through one extreme to the other, maybe hopefully you find a balance.
Because I like how you are very diplomatic in saying that it could be perceived as soft. I could get in trouble for this, but I still feel it's. I said this to my wife, and she wasn't very happy with it. I call them softies, and she's like, "You need to Google up that word and see what it talks about." But I just feel like And you're rightfully so. You say that, you know, they haven't become problem solvers because everything is so systematically planned for them. I mean, I remember going to school in a car back in the days was a privilege. You know, everyone used to take buses. You wouldn't be the first one to be picked up, and the friend who was always picked up the first was always perceived to be the cool kid who always had something waiting for him, right? And I believe that maybe that environment, that growing up, has shaped me in becoming a problem solver now. You know, where you look at something and you're not even going to sit and cry, then be like, okay, this needs to be done, let's solve it this way. The new generation, however, I feel have really taken mental health as a PR move kind of thing, where you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, I can't do this exam, it's too stressful for me. You know, I think it's too much for me. And I tell people, we did NECTA. You know? If you did a national examination in Tanzania, I mean, in today's world, they should be awarding us PhDs because you're doing 6 exams in one day. Yeah. And I still cannot believe that you could get into a position in that exam where if the textbook say geography is a study of XYZ and you wrote WXYZ and you would lose a mark there. You know? So in my opinion, I feel that this new generation, which I rightfully agree with you, needs to be exposed a bit to first world problems and a bit more than what we face. But where do you draw the line? At what point do you say, okay, this now is a mental health problem and this isn't? You need to wake up and say, no, this is not a problem.
So yeah, it's tough. I think it's tough on the children of this generation, but on parents as well, in finding that line that you speak of. Because again, everything on the internet, social media, the current right now, mental health is a trend. It's trending, which is a good thing. It's good that it's building more awareness. But I think the downfall or the downside of that is it's trivialized. So yes, we're building awareness to say this is important. We need to take this seriously. But because everyone under the sun now, I have a mental health struggle, I'm having these challenges and I can't, then the people who are actually genuinely needing support and are struggling are also not taken too seriously because now, everyone's going through this. So finding that line is I think is important, but is also a challenge, right? And I think that's where professionals then tend to come in, right? And also having the right information, because there's a lot of information, but not all of it is appropriate or right information, right? Because when you look, I go through social media, you have, everyone now is an advocate for mental health, everyone now is an expert in mental health, which is good. But the downside is that we're really just speaking about different symptoms and signs and saying, if you have this, you have this condition. And we have a generation that self-diagnoses. I mean, I get so many clients coming in, I have bipolar, I have ADHD, I have borderline personality. And I'm like, okay, hold on, let's take steps back. Where did you find this out? If you have 1 or 2 symptoms, that's normal. Actually, we all have narcissistic tendencies. It does not make you a narcissist, right? So, but the world we are in today is, we have so much of this access to this information, and Google would tell you have cancer if you put in, I have this consistent headache and this, and you're dying in 3 months. And it's the same with the mental health and mental illnesses. So finding and drawing that line is important, but also utilizing the healthcare professionals, utilizing people who are actually trained to screen and assess whether, yes, you are, going through an emotional difficulty and it's something you should go through so that you can build that muscle, or actually you're experiencing a mental illness or a mental health struggle that you need additional support to navigate through. But that's also a challenge, because now we're saying, look for the professional. And most people are wanting to, DIY things. So finding that line is hard. I won't lie. Finding that line is difficult, but equipping yourself with the right information would be important. So even the sources, one thing that could help is vetting the sources you're getting this information from, right? And looking at more than one source so that you can find this commonality. So that will give you an idea or an insight of whether or not, okay, the struggles, let's say my child or myself are experiencing are normal everyday challenges that we all need to actually experience. We cannot be devoid of, unpleasant emotions or stressful life events. Those are things that we have to, as humans, we have to go through. It's necessary, right? Just like we experience the flu, it's important so that we can build the immunity
system.
It's that straightforward. But then there are times where it's a COVID, and it needs to be sorted out. We can't just write it out with soups and rest.
Yes.
There needs to be a bit more. So it's the same with the mental health conditions or mental illnesses as well. Yeah.
Finding the balance is difficult in anything, though. Even in your daily life, even when you do a diet, you have the extreme diet, and then you have the borderline diet, and then you have no diet, which I believe in. But do you think, in any way, shape, or form, that the older generation or our generation went through a phase where, just push this under the carpet, build your resilience, and then we'll see if it needs more action later? And if you compare it to the current generation now, if you were to do that, do you think the results will be completely opposite? Or do you think the kids and the generation would go on the complete opposite side and you would have actually lost an entire generation?
So I think if we take the parenting style from then and just apply it to the kids today, I think you'll face a lot of resistance. And one thing is just the generational changes. Kids today, they exist in a different world to us. I think growing up, I read about psychology in a textbook, and I was only privileged because my brother studied psychology and the textbooks were freely available.
Home,
They're there. Right? But these days, any child with a smartphone or these tablets or any access to the internet has all of this information under the sun. So that type of parenting, they will defy you. I know kids today stand up to their parents and say, no, what you did is not right. Right? And that confidence is not just because of the parents, but I think it's also the changing times and the technological advancements that we're now facing and the exposure they're having in schools. Right? Before, unless you studied in the ISTs where you're studying with global citizens, but oftentimes most of our schools, even the private schools, it's kids exposed to the context here. It's only one or two that have a handful that will be traveling and has exposure to the rest of the world. But nowadays you could be studying in a private school, but even within that, even if there aren't any global citizens in the school, the fact that you have your phone, you're a global citizen.
Makes sense.
So that type of parenting, I don't know if we were to test it out to see if it would work, but merely the fact that it's a generational difference and the world we're living in, the context is changing, the product would be much different as to how that type of parenting, shaped and nurtured us. So it's a tricky balance. I think what's important is to look at the times now, what are you working with? And then choosing the best approach. And the best approach that works for you and works for your child. That's the other thing, that one size never fits all. Like we're all very unique. Even in the same household, you might have two kids. Well, we have twins and they're unique in their own ways. Like one style works with one and the other you need to take a whole different approach. So it's really changing. And kids nowadays, kids from as young as 6 have already exposure, right? The cartoons they watch today are exposed. So you really need to look at the parenting to see, okay, we can't just adopt this I say adopt because a lot of parents just adopt a Western, what is being projected parenting style, because we don't know the reality within their homes. And are trying to translate that into real life. It works to an extent because the kids are exposed and we are wanting them to be more westernized or globalized. But also the reality is they're kids in Africa, within the African context. the people they're engaging with are not Western people. You know, the belief systems that we have within our culture, even within our families, are different. Like you might be very Westernized with your wife in your home, but then the extended families
Is not.
Yeah. It's still very cultural. It's still very localized. It's still very rigid.
Yeah.
So existing in such a world is very, and it can actually be detrimental now if we just adopt, because the kids are getting confused. Yeah, my parents are saying this, no one should yell at me. And I go there, my grandmother is like, sit down or da-da-da-da-da-da, right? So we're basically just confusing the kids. On one aspect, we're saying, oh, people must respect you. You're an individual. No one should yell at you, da-da-da-da. But 2 steps later, and someone within the home is yelling at them, right? We can control it with, let's say, the dadas and the help and say, you don't yell at my child and you don't do this. But you cannot wag that finger in front of your father.
Or your father. Yeah, I agree.
You know? So that confusion is also not nice, because kids, they strive under, you know, consistent things that make sense.
So are you saying kids this generation or kids in general?
Well, in general, but that's the difference now. Our generation, everyone was on the same page. Your mother would yell at you and say, your uncle yelled. Yes, they're an adult. They can do that. But nowadays, parents say, no one should yell at you. Right? And you go out and they're yelling at you.
Because you have this instances where your grandfather or your great-grandfather could be sitting in the room and you're having a public display of affection by holding your wife's hand, and he'd be like, what are you on about? You know, we don't do this in our homes. Like, you have that. And then you have the other side. But I also feel that this other side that we're going to talk about now, which is that the children now have so much exposure to different things, and they like consistency. But do you think parents have now had their arms twisted and they've had to adopt this new Western way of bringing kids up? Because in my defense, and maybe a few or many people won't agree this with me. When you were growing up and your friend had the best shoe in the market, you would never go home and tell your father, look, that guy's got $100 shoe. You would just, you know, in the Gen Z terms, suck it up, you know, and get whatever you have, and you get going. You never chose your tools, or you never compared them with anybody else. Well, yeah, maybe inside you, and I think that's where the mental health aspect comes in, where inside you, you're feeling, oh, I wish I could have that. Why isn't my father buying me one? And I had this story happen with me. My football friend circle, we used to have the most fancy shoes and you know, the modern ones, and you know, you would walk into the football field and everyone's wearing Adidas and Nikes and stuff. And I went maybe 3 months without even having a pair of shoes, because at that point I wasn't in a situation to actually afford that range of shoes. One, and two, when I traveled and I went into the malls in Dubai and I looked at the shoes and I said to myself, if this shoe costs $100, my father needs to do this, and this, X times this. No, I'm not going to spend that. I'm going to buy a 20 dirham shoe. I'm going to keep up with it. And when I think I deserve it, my dad's going to buy it. And that's exactly what happened. 3 months later, my dad came in and said, now you deserve a good shoe. So here it is. But if you were to do that in this generation, it's a bit difficult, because your son comes home and says, oh, Dad, Mom, Mr. A has an iPad and Mr. B's got an iPhone and this one's got this one's got this. Now you are stuck in the limbo. Do you help him integrate with his friends, or do you tell him, listen, you're not still in that right frame of mind to deserve one? And if you do option B, then your child feels left out and feels like he's been ignored, and now the mental health aspect comes in, insecure, you know, inferiority complex and all that kicks in. It's again down to the balance. But do you think parents now have just decided to give in to their kids because they don't want to deal with the mental health problems that come in later?
I think it's a combination of things. One, again, every person experiences things differently, right? Let's say the same example of yours. It worked out differently for you. It built something within you, you know, that you need to earn things. and we need to be patient. And there is this sense of delayed gratification that I want those shoes, but I know right now, maybe I can't get them, right? And it makes you also considerate. You mentioned something about factoring in what would your dad need to do
to be able to
afford these shoes.
Yeah.
Which is also building responsibility, building not only the delayed gratification, which is good for ourselves, that oftentimes we can't just get what we want right there and then.
Yeah.
We need to build that patience, right? And it never made you give up on the fact that I would love these shoes, right? Parents these days, I think some coming from their own traumas. So because I didn't have, my child will have.
Yeah.
You have a lot of those, right? Another one is more so their own image. How are people perceiving me in the society? So I've taken my child to DIA, and these other DIA parents, I'm advertising DIA for free here, but other parents can afford these things for their kids. I don't want to look like I can't. So it's more so my status and my image and my standing in society, which I think our parents, it really wasn't that big of a deal. They were all like building themselves from the ground. Right? So everyone is trying to work hard to build. Whereas now we're more so, I think, status driven. I think the society we're in. So there's that aspect that I'm coming from my own trauma. I didn't have, so I want my child to have. So I'm like vicariously living through them. Also, it's more my status. How are people going to perceive me in society? Right? If my child shows up and doesn't know how to play a PS, people are going to laugh not only at my child, but they'll probably say the parents can afford these things for the child. So it's our own traumas, right? And then two, the society also, which feeds into our status and our symbol, because the society is not kind, right? They group you and place you in spaces based on what you're showing us externally. And our kids are kind of our ambassadors. You're the country, these people are representatives. So how they're portrayed also influences how people portray us and how people engage with us. So in that sense, our arms are being twisted, that if I want to be respected, if, even these business deals, where does your child study? Is something that can influence whether you get this deal or not.
I agree, 100%.
The watch I'm wearing, whether it is just a Samsung or it's an Omega, whatever watch, will influence whether this person I'm sitting across will take me seriously. So there's a lot of that. Our arms are being twisted because our society has become very capitalistic and has become very soft.
Would you say it's also very judgmental as well?
Very judgmental. I think that's the right word. Very judgmental, very superficial. And now it's not looking at the actually depth of the person, it's more on the surface. How are they portraying and projecting themselves? So these are all parent factors that we're bringing in as parents, because we want to be seen in a certain way, we want to, be spoken about in a certain way, and our own trauma. And then with our kids today, I think they're just a byproduct. I think the way you parent will shape the way they respond and react in any given situation. The only reason you did not throw a tantrum and tell your dad, I'm not going for these football games until these kids today tell you that, until I get these Nike shoes, is because of the environment they created. That, this is how we parent you, whether they explain to you or whether or not we're not questioning. When we deserve things, we get them. That determines the child's reaction.
Interesting.
They're kind of like blank slates.
Yeah.
We kind of put the programming. So if they throw a tantrum today, best believe you put those coding in that system. It's a product of what you put in.
So then you're a big believer in generational trauma, which is parental trauma affecting the child.
It is. And sometimes for those who actually are more introspective and are aware, then their parenting styles are a bit different, because they know, okay, I want to get my child, but then they're like, I'm doing this because I didn't get it. So they look, can we afford it? Do they deserve it? Is it the right time? Like, my 8-year-old child, what are they going to do with an iPhone?
Yeah.
They probably not going to use half of the features of that phone.
Okay. So it's very funny you say that, because when I was talking to my wife, and she's like, when did you get your first phone? And I was like, yeah, when I was in grade 11, 10 or 11. He's like, what? Who gets a phone then? I said, well, that was the trend back in the days, that you would only get it in secondary school. Oh, our generation, we had this. I don't know why she makes it sound like she's from a completely different generation. But yeah, she's like, we had phones when we were in primary. And I was like, what on earth are you doing with a phone, a smartphone, in primary?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, oh, no, but this was the trend back then. And it brings us back to the same thing. This feeling of wanting to be accepted and significant. And do you think that is what has created a huge need for mental health addressing in children today? Do you think it's because of our own issues, our own problems, and we don't realize that we are the ones who have caused these problems to our children, and then we blame the outside society?
A large chunk. That is the actual case. Because even with that, kids, yes, want to fit. These are developmental things. We get to a certain age and our friend groups are important. Like, I want to be accepted because this is my tribe. My parents are no longer cool anymore, right? And we will do anything under the sun to get that acceptance. But when a parent, let's say everyone in the friend circle has a phone and you don't, and a parent just, you go and complain and they get you one, they're not, basically all these are opportunities. I think I can put it in that way. An opportunity for your child to learn how to be creative and how to problem solve. Yeah. If I use myself as an example, I saved a lot of money because my friends had a phone and my parents were like, no, what do you need a phone for?
Yeah.
I didn't need the phone. I just needed to fit in, that I also have a phone. But that got me to start thinking, how am I going to get a phone? They're not going to give me one. And I hope my parents don't listen. But I saved a lot of my money, my lunch money, and I bought a phone. And I had it in secret. I didn't use it. But just so that when we're in the group, we say, I also have a phone.
You put your phone on the table, or then Nadia's now in the circle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what did that do? Them saying no created an opportunity for me to get creative. I became enterprising, because I remember I used to freeze ice water and stand outside my mother's gate and sell it because people are walking. So it makes you, kids are very creative. And what's happening today, parents solving their problems just like that is shattering, killing that creativity. And the older you get, the less creative, because your mind is naturally also just shedding away what you don't use. So if your parent is the one solving your problems, those parts of problem solving are not needed.
Non-existent, yeah.
And so they get shedded away. They're shedded away. They're like released, removed, and you're just keeping the parts that you are utilizing. So again, it's the parents' traumas, the parents' parenting styles, and them wanting to like alleviate their children of any distress is causing this softer generation, which is actually true. It is much softer of a generation today.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here for something that might make the both of us get in trouble in our community centers. There's this big thing about religion and mental health, and religion not accepting mental health. Do you think religion now and religious leaders have now accepted that mental health is an issue? Because I remember my grandfather, I was sitting with him and I would be like, this guy, he's not feeling really well. He's like, 20 years ago, it was prayer time and he walked under a tree and he must have gotten this black magic thing and now he's possessed. So if you take this book and if you go to this page, you need to recite this particular verse and it might help you. And I've seen it in my friend circles where there is a slaughtering of goats and there is a spilling of blood and chicken and all of that that's being done. And you're thinking, maybe it's just a mental health issue. You're just trying to bring religion into it. But do you think that back in the days, because people were so spiritually ingrained and wanting to keep going to the mosque because that was the norm and the trend back in the days. I'm not saying people aren't spiritual enough now, but back in the days, missing a prayer at mosque would be a big thing. Like even for me, my dad during school holidays would actually call my mom at home and be like, "Where are the kids? One day at mosque." You know, so because of that feeling of always wanting to be at mosque, so your mind was probably not possessed, but it was occupied with the remembrance of God and wanting to be closer to God. So you never understood the mental health. Do you think now religious leaders have come to a point and said, you know what, maybe we underplayed this game and we didn't understand, and we just kept, I don't know if you have it in your culture, but in our culture they give you this, they call it the taweez kind of thing, where they tie something here and it's got some Quranic verses in it and scriptures. Do you think that also contributed towards the absence of mental health addressing?
So, before I tap into that, like, we can just look at how religion. So again, I can't speak for all the religions, but I know with Islam, I think the first, I don't know what was the scholar's name, Ibn Sina. He started coining concepts around mental health and mental illnesses, and also the first traditional holistic psychotherapy. It is these Muslim scholars that came up with these concepts and tried to integrate all of this into, mainstream healthcare, if we can call it. Even when you look across the Quran, there's a lot of talk about anxiety, of depression, like anxiety, what they call it, nafs shaitan. It's like, it's like waswas that comes to you, which is basically what anxiety is, right? And it really does help. Because when you look at the tools we teach people today in psychotherapy, it's literally meditate on something, right? Be it your breath, be it a specific mantra, be it a specific focus, for example. When you're having an anxiety attack, refocus on your breath, right? Which is what in religion they tell you to do, dhikr, like remembrance of Allah. What are you doing there? You are refocusing your mind on something else other than the anxiety in your head, right? But I think along the way with religion, especially with the Muslim religion, from way back when, this understanding of mental health was there and the integration. And today, yes, we have these labels, anxiety and depression and this and that, which helps so that we can call a spade, right? But everything that they used to do, the prayer is meditation, right? When you look at how we pray, it's literally, I always tell people, prayer is like, for me, is like yoga. I am twisting and I am turning and I am folding and I'm going up and I'm moving my body, right? There's flow of energy throughout the time. And it's five times in a day, I am stopping to get out of my head, to focus on something outside of me.
Interesting.
It gives you a break out of the anxieties and out of yourself. Because we've become very egocentric. We're focusing on just me and what I'm feeling and going through. But what religion tells you is that get out of you, that's bigger than you.
Yeah.
Remember that bigger than you, So there are little habits that are within religion that have been designed to help us cope with our own mental health struggles, but they're just not labeled that this is this. Which nowadays we say, go see the therapist, this is psychotherapy, this is meditation, this is yoga, this is medication. But before, it's just integrated into our systems. And we don't even know we're doing the right things that we need to be doing to keep ourselves healthy and well. And I think nowadays, people are moving away from religion. We're not, as you rightfully, nowadays kids don't want to be at the mosque, don't want to be spending time reading the Quran or what does that do? It just takes you away from what's happening within the world to focus on something that is beyond you, something that is higher than ourselves. With the Christianity religion, I think nowadays they're picking up and accepting it more. They even have, I think, part of their studies, there's integration with mental health. But before, it was understood as spiritual possession. You've committed a sin, it's punishment. The only treatments there were either we pray for you, we do exorcisms, right? And so, or you go through your days because you're a bad sinner. You've done something really bad and you're being punished. Your punishment is starting today. And then you have the traditional, right, aspects. Let's say with a lot of African countries, it was seen as spiritual possessions and things like that. And they were treated spiritually. They were treated with this magical, think magic doctors or traditional witch doctors and things like that, right? But all of it is coming from now those understandings. And with religion, I don't know, I am a Muslim, so I sound very biased, but I think the Islamic religion understood the concept of mental health and really embraced it from a very long time, but understood the human brain enough to say, if we label this and say you're struggling with a mental health issue, the mind would kind of block that out and be resistant.
Yeah.
So let's just teach them a way of life that helps them. Because when you look at it, like what you were saying, literally, if I'm coming from school, I eat, I shower, I go to the mosque. My focus is now community more than me, and I'm focusing on God. Then one, it's saving you from doing things that you're not needing to do.
Yeah.
It's saving you from focusing on the shoes that you didn't get that your friends have, because now at the mosque, we're all taking off our shoes anyway. We're all basically one.
Yeah.
None of us is more or less than the other. And in the mosque, they can be the one who begs on the street that's there and the one that's been dropped off with a Mercedes. We're all praying on the same mat. So it really humbles you.
But on the flip side, the modern generation, and I'm going to be in a lot of hatred for this, but then this whole thing of social anxiety, my child is uncomfortable being in big gatherings. I don't know if I want to send my child to the mosque. I don't know if he can integrate with people. But at what point now do you say, hey, you know what, this is now just nonsense. You gotta stop this and stop using it as a wild card? Because I think you are in a very challenging field right now, because you could have someone coming in and rightfully, like you said, have already self-diagnosed themselves.
Yeah.
Now that ChatGPT is also a therapist.
Yes. I've actually had someone come in and said, ChatGPT recommended I come see you. Because they said, whatever you're going through is beyond my scope.
Oh, wow.
I was like, okay, that's good.
But you have all of that's going on, and you have this ChatGPT thing, this Google thing, and everyone's. But at some point, I mean, you got to take control and be like, hey, you know what, no, man, come on, you're being a bit overly too much. And you must have that coming your way, because anyone who comes in here, oh, my child's acting a bit weird and strange, you can solve that problem. But are you an actual problem solver, or are you someone who helps people look into themselves and help them solve their own problem?
So we're more so, I would say, co-pilots. At the end of the day, we don't solve your problems. We just, point to the right questions and get you to look at the right spots. Funny that you said about parents. That's what usually happens. They'll bring in, my child is a problem. They're going through 1, 2, 3. And then I usually am like, I think we need to sit with you. And parents are never happy when they're like, no, my child is the problem, right? But usually the child is just, as I said earlier, they're just a reflection of your style, of you. Children are literally they're just mirroring, because we're their models. Right? They look up to us and they learn how to respond to the world through us. Even with a child with anxiety being in a crowded space, the fact that the parent said, okay, I will not take you there anymore, we're actually building the social anxiety for them in that process. Because one, they are a child. Two, yes, it's a crowd. I mean, if it's the first time going to the mosque or being in such an environment, they will be overwhelmed. It's a lot of things happening, and especially with kids who are very sensitive when it comes to their senses, they're sensorily overwhelmed. They want to just be out of there. But as a parent, you're their coach to help them navigate, to help them integrate, because you know that the world they exist in is not going to be a world of 3 people. That they will go into career co and they will, if they have not learned how to quiet that noise for themselves, they will fall on the ground.
But this is the modern generation that only shops online, so I don't think they even know what career co looks like.
That is very true. These are things that don't help. Imagine they're in an airport, right? So it's the parent's job to kind of, understand and empathize with the child, that I know this is overwhelming. You need to kind of coach the child through. And this is the thing with most parents. When they come in, I say, you need to be the emotion coach. The child will have anxiety. They will be scared. They will be sad. but you're the one that teaches them how to navigate through the sad. So oftentimes when parents don't even know for themselves how to navigate, that is when they're like, no, your problem, Nadia can help you. Right? And then usually I say, let's sit down with you so I can teach you how to be the parent that you need to be for your child. But that usually is not very accepted, not easily accepted. So usually you go back to, okay, we can work with your child and we can teach them and just slide the lessons for the parents in between as we go.
And hope that they accept
And hope that they accept it. But that's the thing. I think if there's parents listening, we need to take that, like you said, that responsibility, because we have that control. Yes, we have very little control in life, but one thing we can control is what we teach our children.
I always think of this, and I had this experience recently in one of our community centers where there was an exhibition, and we walked in there, and there was this announcement that some of the things that you might see will be very graphical, and if you don't want a child to be exposed to stuff like that. And I said then, I said, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that thing would turn up on your TV screen, caution, and you wouldn't even bother reading about it because you're like, okay, here we go, another thing. But now you have this whole thing, or don't expose your child to something very aggressive. It might shape their behavior and it might make them want to be there. And it takes us back to this whole, what cartoon can your child watch and what cartoon your child can't watch. And then you have these eggshells that parents are now walking with. Do I expose my child or not expose my child? If I do, I could be in trouble. If I don't, I could be in trouble. And I think majority of the times, and you can correct me, there is when the couple are from two different generations. Where the husband could be like more of a corporal punishment kind of guy, and then the wife is the softer, educate your child kind of thing. That's where the whole conflict begins. But my question to you is, do you think that the current generation can have both parts of their life, the older generation resilience and the new generation understanding of mental health, and then they can take that and shape the way forward?
Certainly. I think, and that's the best way, because it's like taking a yin and yang, and we create a nice, holistic picture. Because like you said before, maybe people didn't pay attention to these, the cautionary messages, and children were exposed, or, now there's a lot more exposure compared to before. So now you have to be a lot more cautious. But the fact that we are kind of streamlining or screening what the kids are exposed to is important, because a child's brain is like a sponge. Whatever it is that you expose to them is really stored. So if we're exposing them to like violent video games and things like that, or violent cartoons, then we're teaching them violence is okay, right? So the fact that now I think that's a good thing that's come up is we're conscious, like, okay, what am I exposing my child to? And is it appropriate, right? Do I want them to be exposed to these things? Rightfully, they might stumble onto, let's say, a movie where there's a lot of violence, right? But the fact that it's just stumbling into it teaches them that that's not a norm. That's not normal. But if we're constantly exposed to, these games that are violent, that are kind of portraying a specific lifestyle that maybe is not acceptable for us, our nuclear culture or our greater culture, greater community, then we're teaching kids things that are normal that in their society will not be accepted, right? So when you bring those two and create that balance, it's saying, I cannot protect you from everything. You might walk out of the house and see a car accident or see violence, but my job is to sit down with you and kind of help you process through those feelings, and that's the softer side. But also for the parent who's coming in, the exposed parent who is very much on the other side, where it's saying we should shield our children from everything under the sun. Their contribution comes in with, okay, let's sit through and process what you just saw, but also help to kind of streamline what are we exposing them to, so that we're not normalizing things that we don't want to be normalized. Right. Nowadays, cartoons are let's say if we just speak about cartoons or exposure on the phones, there's just so much. There's so much, and the computers, let's say with the TikToks, a 1-year-old child can register on TikTok and it's okay. But the content that is in there, do we want this child, is their brain ready to receive this? Right? I know some parents are open. The child can have a relationship and be in a, but I know growing up, until I got married is when my parents are like, yes, this is okay. Growing up, you're just like, oh, I can't, this is like my boyfriend, but my parents will never know because it is unacceptable. All of that was helpful because it's teaching you that responsibility, right? Nowadays, kids 15, 12, oh, ma'am, this is my boyfriend, or this is my girlfriend, and this is my this and that. And their brains they don't even grasp what it is to be in a relationship, right? So I think mixing the two is important. The traditional needs to come in because it brings that firm hand that, you know what, things are supposed to be like this. And ultimately, I'm the adult, so I know what is best, which is true, right? Basically, a child doesn't know. The child might cry for the lighter, but they might burn themselves. So as the adult, you need to say no. Yes, the child knows I want it because it's shiny and I like it, but you know the danger that comes with it.
Yeah.
Right? And mixing with the softer to say, okay, let's not be too harsh. Right? We don't want to traumatize them and then they overcompensate at some point in life. So bringing those two, I think, brings that balance.
What would your dad do in this? If 20 years ago you went to your dad and said, this is my boyfriend, or this is a guy friend of mine?
I don't even know.
Because back in the days, if your parents saw you speaking to the opposite gender, it was borderline crime.
Yes.
Yeah, borderline crime.
Yeah, because it was a sin. I don't know who said it to me, but I knew it's like a crime. I will go to hell. Yeah. So I need to and
then there was two types. And there was two types of hell, because you had the God hell that they've been talking about. And then the hell waiting for you at home when your father finds out.
Exactly, when they find out. Or you're grounded, or you're not allowed to do 1, 2, 3, or your privileges are taken away. So which kids today, softer parenting styles is becoming permissive, but it's also dangerous.
It's one of those now, you see, where your son now comes home and says, Mom, this is my girlfriend. And you're like, oh, nice to meet you. What do you think? And let's go for a meal together and stuff like that. I still remember going for a night out with your friends or going for a sleepover at your friend's house. Asking that, you would have to go to mosque, pray to God that your father says, dad's in a good mood.
Yes.
Let me just go home and find him in the right mood. And now it's a completely different phenomena. But let me ask you this: when was your first experience of mental health? Did you ever have therapy? Did you ever go and say, I've had enough, and I now need to go for therapy?
So, I think for me, it was. So if I look at my childhood, I went through a lot of ups and downs and ins and outs, but again, managed to navigate. It was only when I was in university, and it was a requirement. Part of my program, we had to be in therapy.
Oh, okay.
And at that point, with my student budget, I could not afford therapy. It was expensive, especially where, I was in South Africa, it was quite pricey. It don't fit in my budget. And my supervisor told me, you know what, the next best thing is go do yoga. That's why I'm a huge fan of yoga, because it forces you to meditate. And as all kids, we kind of, as we grow, we're moving away from religion. So because of how it was portrayed to us. But as I'm going, I'm like, okay, this yoga is like praying, okay, but it really helped to ground me. My first actual moment where I felt, okay, I need to sit with a therapist, with a mental health professional, is when I started working. My first work environment was within a trauma center. And here I was working with people who are coming from, the Congo, Rwanda, Burundi. So they've seen war, they've seen all these crimes. And also working with kids in the Cape Townian community, where there's a lot of gang violence, a lot of drugs, a lot of these issues. And with working through them, because of our work, we're sitting there, we're fully immersing into your world. We're like taking your information in. I got secondary traumatized.
Oh no.
And so I was very hypervigilant. I was very alert,
Yeah.
which was very distressing because a friend could like touch me on the shoulder and I'll panic. That's when I was like, okay, this is not, I don't think this is normal. And that's when I was like, okay, you know what? I will cut on the food so I can afford this.
The therapy.
Yes. And that's when I actually, went into therapy. Nowadays, I used to say it's a luxury, and I still believe it's a luxury. Not everyone can afford therapy. For a reason, I believe. I think if we build the right tools, you don't need to sit with a Nadia, right? I think it should just be I have it, when I need it, it's there.
It's like chemotherapy kind of thing, wouldn't you say?
I believe so, right? I believe so.
Because you have this thing where a little bit of shock, I need to go see a therapist.
Yes.
A little bit of conflict, let me run to the therapist.
But you're not really giving yourself the opportunity to problem solve. And what's happening in that process is you're teaching your brain to think that I don't know how to solve my life issues until I sit with
somebody
a professional.
else, yeah.
Right? But once you give yourself the opportunity and you try the different tools that you have in your box and you see, okay, I've tried everything and it hasn't worked, then go see one. Because then what that teaches your brain is, I have the resources, and then your brain learns also that, okay, there are times we don't have the resources and we need someone who has these resources. They can, and in those cases, I think the process with someone who's gone through that is much faster because they're coming in with the attitude of problem solving, with the attitude of wanting to do for themselves what they need.
Yeah.
When someone comes in and they've not actually tried or attempted anything to solve their own issues, even the tools you give them, they don't use. Because again, with our work, I can't change your world for you. I can tell you, these are the tools so you can add into your toolbox for you to use when you feel, okay, here I need this.
Yeah.
Right? But people today, I think I go back to trivialize. We've trivialized mental health so much that it's like, it's an over-the-counter thing. I can just go in and get it.
Go find your solution there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rather than digging deep and actually looking at what do I have in my toolbox to navigate, and then knowing, because in that process you get to know that I don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that can help me navigate. But if you just go in, it's an automatic, I don't have resources. And you will keep coming in. And we're not complaining because you're keeping us
busy.
Operational. But it's also taking away space from people who actually genuinely need to be sitting with a therapist.
Yeah, makes sense. So I've never said this to anyone, but now I'm going to say it. My first experience of mental health was actually very interesting. I was in uni and I had to submit my dissertation, but I had gone through an eye surgery, so I couldn't submit it in time. So I asked for an extension. So the course lead directed me to an office and he's like, you have an appointment here. So I turn up there and it's this nice cozy office, and this guy comes in and he dims the light and I'm like, what the hell's happening here? Yeah. So he's like, how are you, Mohammed? How are you feeling? I said, no, I'm feeling good. He said, okay, tell me what's your problem. I said, I have no problem. I just want an extension for my dissertation. He said, oh, so you're probably at the wrong office. I said, what office are you? He's like, oh, we are the mental health student support kind of thing. I walked out of there more depressed than I actually was, But I actually did my first therapy a year ago. I think I still do slightly. My friends will testify to this. I had serious anger issues. I would break stuff and I would get really riled up. And credit to my wife, she is like, you know what, this needs sorting. So none of these, wear this ring and do this, and there is a religious side of it. So she actually signed me up with a therapist who did anger management. And since then I've been a huge advocate for mental, as much as I still believe that the new generation is soft. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
There are times where you need to come to terms with the fact that these things are now beyond your control. But when I went into therapy, and like you just said, I didn't go there waiting for someone to solve my problem. And I, credit to my therapist at that time, he actually made me go through this journey and said, look, these are your triggers. This is what bothers you. This is how you need to find yourself. It was, I think, around 6 to 7 sessions, like you were saying. And, I think if I was in this generation, I would still be with him because, you feel like another guy needs to come and solve your problem. But I genuinely, and to whoever's watching this, I'm not downplaying mental health. I'm not underplaying it, but I fully agree with you that there are times in life where you need to stop playing this mental health excuse and card and take control of your life. Yeah. To end this, what would your message be to those watching this and to wherever this may go? It might come across that because you're a mental health advocate that you keep telling people to seek for help, but what is one underlying message that you would like to share with everyone?
I think differentiating between everyday mental health struggles and, like what you said, I got to a point where I don't have the solutions, right? And seeking help then. And for those who have children, to looking at how do I become the right coach for my child rather than outsourcing that. So again, taking control and taking that agency that I have control over my day-to-day steps. I have control over what my experience is, right? And ultimately, you are the one who knows. Like, you know what's happening for you. You know what resources and tools you have and don't have. So rather than immediately seeking support or immediately saying, no, I'm not going to seek support because of 1, 2, 3, to look internally and reflect and see what do I actually, what do I actually need? Do I have the right resources? Do I have the right tools, right, to navigate these challenges that I'm having?
Right.
So I think if people should take away anything, is taking back that ownership that I am responsible and in charge of my well-being, right? And you are the one who's in control, right? So taking those steps and making sure that you're doing what's best for you based on what you've analyzed or you've reflected on to see what's missing and what's there, right? So those are a lot of things, but in a nutshell.
Well, it's been amazing talking to you about this and your journey in this, and I think there's a lot to take away from this. I still, and will always say this, mental health is, Nadia thought I'm going to say everyone's soft. But
yes, I thought so. That's why I was like, oh my.
Mental health is real. It's not a hoax. It's not a myth. You just need to come to terms with it. As long as you don't overplay it and overuse this card and try to get yourself out of trouble, then it actually is real. I've been there. I've gone through my own set of therapy and treatment, and here I am talking about this topic that for many still might be a taboo or something sensitive to talk about. But if you are in Dar es Salaam or in Tanzania or anywhere in East Africa, then make your way to Mind Matters. They deal with mental health issues. They're very good at what they do. As you can see, Nadia is here now. She's a big advocate for all of this stuff. And if you're the new generation, try to be a bit harder. Don't be too soft on this. Thank you so much, Nadia. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is it. We'll see you for the next episode. Hopefully, it's talking about which, before I end, I've been thinking about how everyone's so AI based. And I want to come up with a new concept called the original intelligence, because I just feel everyone's just AI based. Do you think artificial intelligence and ChatGPT could replace therapists?
No. I think proof is this person who came in and said, I use this AI therapist, and they got to a point and said, go see, there's Mind Matters in your vicinity,
right.
Go, right? I think the human touch is still very important.
Right.
And until they can, create that, then yeah, we'll still need the traditional therapists.
Well, I think you got to give credit to the therapist, because if AI tells you I've had enough of your trouble, go find someone who can listen to you. The therapists really do need the credit. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll be back for something more exciting, more controversial than this, but this is the start of much more to come. Thank you very much, and enjoy your day, everyone.